Okay, we're looking at lesson 6-1, roots and radical expressions. So we already know that when we already understand the properties of square roots, third roots, cube roots, fourth roots, and fifth roots. So now we're talking about nth roots. So if a to the n equals b, with a and b being real numbers and n a positive integer, then a is the nth root of b. Now this might not make sense, this box might not make sense until you actually see the actual example, and hopefully then it'll make sense. So if n is odd, when I take the nth root of a number, and n is an odd number is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so forth, there is one real nth root of b, denoted in the radical form. The only nth root of 0 is 0. Okay? If n is even and b is positive, there are two real nth roots of b. The positive root is the principal root, our principal nth root, and its symbol is the nth root of b. The negative root is its opposite, or the negative nth root of b. And b is negative, there are no real nth roots of b. So I can show you a little example of this. So, for example, whenever I take anything to, let's say negative 1, for example, if I take that to the third power, that's going to give me a negative number. So whenever if I take it to the fifth power, it's going to give me a negative number. However, when I take it negative 1 to an even number instead, it's always going to come out positive. And so this is what they're referring to by saying that for the odd values, I'm only going to get one real root, but for even, it can be positive or negative, because 1 squared is also 1, and 1 to the fourth is also 1. So, but for odd numbers, it would be either negative or positive. Okay, so let's look at an example. You use a radical sign to indicate a root. The number under the radical is the radicand, and the index is the degree, is the degree of the root. And this is the radical sign. Okay? So problem 1, it says, what are the real cube roots of, and this is, a cube root is going to the third power. So they're asking me for the cube root of 0.008. Okay? And I'm only going to get one value, so it would be 0.2. So if I take the cube root, I know that 0.2 to the third power is also equal to 0.008. So 0.2 is the only real cube root. Negative 1,000, I know that that would be negative 10. It would be the only answer. And then 1 over 27, I know that that would be 1/3. So the cube root of 127 is equal to 1/3. All right, let's look at part B. Now we're talking about an even. So the real fourth root of 1. So they're talking about the fourth root of 1. And we all know that's 1. The fourth root of negative, we know that we can't take the negative, we can't have the fourth root of a negative number. So that would not work. I'm sorry, I did forget that we also have, for the fourth root, we also have the negative of that, so that would be negative 1. So we have two answers. Apologize for that. So since it's negative, there's no real fourth root. The next one is square root of 16 over, fourth root, I'm sorry. So the fourth root of 16 over 81, and that would be 2 over 3, because 3 to the 4th power is 81 and 2 to the 4th power is 16. And I also get negative 2 over 3 as well, because the negatives can also be to the 4th root. Okay, so now let's do the guided on our own. I'm going to clear out my board. And it says, what is the real fifth root of 0, negative 1, and 32? So for the fifth root of 0, remember they told us that any root of 0 is just 0. And this is an odd, so I'm only going to get one answer. The fifth root of negative 1 is negative 1. And the fifth root of 32 is 2. Alright, looking at part B, what is the square root of 0.1? So the square root, when I do square root, that's the only one that doesn't need the number. It's understood if there's nothing there that is dealing with 2. So the square root of 0.1, I think, let me make sure. Let me see. 0.01, square root is 0.1. Yeah, just like I thought. So 0.1, and I also have negative 0.1. Oops. Alright, so I have 2 answers for square roots. The square root of negative 1 I can't do. It's no real square root. It is a value, but it's imaginary, so this one is not real. So not real. We'll put not real for that one. And then the square root of 36 over 121. I get 6 over 11 and negative 6 over 11. Alright. Explain why a negative real b has no real nth root if n is even. So we talked about that before at the very beginning. We said that if it's a negative, that we can't, there's nothing that I can multiply twice. So for example, negative 1. If I multiply it, negative 1 times negative 1, I get positive 1. Whenever I multiply a negative times a negative, I always get a positive. So I can't take something and get a negative when I multiply by two of those things. So that's impossible. So I hope this helps.